Hey everybody. So before we start our video today, I just want to say get out there and get vaccinated. I know the stigma that comes with vaccinations, and there's a whole bunch of conspiracies, but the fact of the matter is, especially the topics that we're going to cover today, you do need your vaccination or else you will be left behind. So just get out there, get vaccinated. You rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So let's get into our video. Peace. What's it like living in France? This is a question that I get asked very often. I've lived in France for the last 2 years. Let's start from the beginning. For one, the language. Bonjour. Tout va bien? French is a very difficult language. When you get there, it's like that's the best way you can learn the language. So if you have aspirations to learn French, or you have aspirations to, study the language in depth, that is the best way to do it. Submerge yourself in the actual country where you can learn different phrases that you might not learn in the books or in your app. I do suggest that you do download an app before you get there, just so you can have a good base of the language. Simple terms that you can say in the street, terms that you can say in the restaurant, shopping for food. You can say certain terms in the grocery store, so you want to have a good basis of the language. I'll do more videos and expand on that in the future. 2, the culture. French culture is a very special culture. Open people, nice people. However, they are, I've traveled to many countries, especially in Europe. The French people are a bit less forgiving when it comes to you understanding their culture. So for example, my first day in France, I went to a grocery store. I was shopping for, some food for my apartment, and nobody in the grocery store would help me. So I came in there, I had no idea about French. I didn't study the language before I got there. I didn't study it in school before when I was young. And I go in this grocery store, and I ask the first person I see that works there, hey, I'm looking for, let's say it was apples at the time. I'm looking for apples. How do I find apples? And he looks at me, he said, "Ne parle anglais." I found that a little strange, so I said, okay, you know what? It happens. A lot of people don't want to help you. A lot of people, they have other things to do. I'm the American in there, so it's like, I can't expect everybody to drop everything to help me. So I go to the next person. Next person says the same thing. Oh, I don't understand. No speaker English. And now that's when I started to find it weird, because I had just came from Spain, where, in the local grocery store, I can go in there and ask a Spanish worker for some help or some assistance, and they'll give it to me immediately, no questions asked. With the French culture, they're a bit closed off. Like they know how special they are, and if you're gonna travel there, they want to at least see some effort. They want to know that you read up about them, but they want to know that you at least try to speak their language, because to them it is important. Different sense of humor, a very social country. These are some things that you have to be aware of going into the country. To expand on the sense of humor thing, I've had run-ins with some French people that I work closely with, and we'll be going back and forth. I'll say something that I thought was funny, and the person that I said it to would take it literal. I realize that our sarcasm is a little bit more harsh than theirs. When I try to be sarcastic, it doesn't always come off the right way, and sometimes you don't know if you're offending somebody, so you have to really be careful of how you joke. It's a very social culture. I realized when I traveled there that I'm more individualistic in social settings. I'm on a team in France, so when we ride together as a team, I want to be alone, I want to reflect, I want to think things that's normal to me, but in the French culture, it's more so normal to always be around people and always talk to people. That led me to have questions myself, because I'm like, is anybody here an introvert? You know what I mean? Like in America, it's okay to be an introvert. You're quiet, you're closed off. It's totally normal, and that's how I am. I like to go out sometimes, but most of the times I like to be alone or keep to myself. There is like, you can do it, but it's not really seen as like a cool thing. If you're kept to yourself, they'll look at it like, oh, what did we do wrong? Like, did we offend you? Why don't you want to join the discussion? You can just come out and say, I just want to be by myself, and they won't take offense to it. But if you don't explain yourself, they're probably going to take offense. Food. There's so many stereotypes about the French food. They cook with a lot of cheese, or it's just crepes. These are true to some degree. However, there are so many more options, to explore. So I would say, if you are going to France, keep an open mind. My personal favorites are things like raclette, galette, gratin. Be open-minded. It's not going to be what you're used to coming from America or coming from another country. However, if you really love what your country has to offer, then yes, you can find it. You can find chicken tenders, or you can find French fries and steak if you are invited to eat at somebody's house. The French are known for having big lunches or big dinners in the day. So, for instance, if you're invited to eat at somebody's house for lunch, it might be you and your family, a couple other families, all coming together to eat at one grand lunch. What ends up happening in French culture is there's a 3-course meal. First, you have your apéro. You know, you have your appetizers, sweet wines or your sweet drinks. They bring you like finger food and things like this. Then you have the actual meal. It can be a variety of things, usually things that you can just pick from. And then you have your dessert. It can be coffee, it can be a pastry. Usually somebody bakes something, and you know, you'll have different options. Particularly for lunchtime, these big meals tend to take a long time. So somebody invites you to come over at, let's say, 12 o'clock. Right, and they say, okay, you can come over for lunch. First off, I like to, you know, show up late and get right to the eating. So if you want to get right to the eating, you're gonna have to show up a little bit late. You know, you're gonna have to show up at about 1:30. If you show up at 12, what's gonna happen is your apéro is gonna take so long. It's gonna take, you know, a whole hour or 2 hours talking to everybody and seeing how everybody's doing. Everybody's catching up, and then you're gonna get into your meal and the rest of the stuff. So now, let's say it was slated to start at 12. You possibly might not get out of there until 5, you know, and then when you get home, you'll be stuffed, you'll be talked out, so you're going home completely exhausted, and then you probably got to take a nap, which they call a siesta, after that. And we'll get into that next. That's a perfect segue. Siesta. It's like a slated time just for a nap. And my first experience with this was, you know, it took me about a week to catch on. I would leave my house during these times, and everything would be closed. So for about a good week, I was convinced that there was like some type of French holiday going on that I didn't know about. Kind of embarrassing. This siesta time is actually kind of cool, you know. It's almost like they mastered their work-life balance, you know. They don't work too hard. They're gonna work from 9 to 12 or 9 to 2, and then just go home, take a nap, and then you know, continue their day from about 5 to 7 or 5 to 9. From a personal standpoint, I understand it. Like that is a great schedule. But from a consumer standpoint, it is a little inconvenient. The worst thing for me was the banks. You know, the banking system is something that takes a long time to get used to. You know, especially coming from America, where it's like, you know, Monday through Saturday, and then some banks even open on Sundays. However, there, it's like, it's only open, you know, like I said, they have the siesta, so they only open from 9 to 12 in the morning, and then you can't get back in until, you know, 5 o'clock p.m. The banks are not open on Mondays, and they close early on Fridays. So it's like, from Friday, if you didn't hit the bank before 12 o'clock on Friday, you're not going to be able to get in there until about Tuesday. You know, so that's a long time for you not to, you know, handle whatever you needed to handle on Friday. Now we'll talk about the effects that COVID had on the country. I was living in France when COVID first started to hit, right around March 2020. You know, you started to see things escalate. You started to see people wearing masks, but it was just a lot of rumors at that time, up until, you know, everything started to shut down. My employees at the time, I was, you know, playing on the basketball team, they shipped me home to America in order to quarantine, because if I stayed in France, there would just be nothing to do. So they said, you know what, you might as well be home with your family and doing nothing. In August 2020, I returned back to France, and so now I was dealing with living in France in a semi-open kind of space. You know, it was kind of open. The gyms were open, restaurants. You pretty much had freedom. However, that's when like the cases were starting to rise again, and you know, you kind of saw the second wave on the horizon. So now when the second wave hit, and I think that was around November 2020, I want to say, that's when the country went back on lockdown. It wasn't a complete lockdown. Like, you still had some freedoms. You could still go shopping and things like that. But however, there were some restrictions. So for instance, we all had curfew. Here you are, a grown person living abroad, and you have all this freedom, perceived freedom, but you had to be home in your house by 6 o'clock. A bunch of my family had plans on coming to visit me that year. However, they weren't letting anybody in the country, especially not from the United States. There was no way for you to get into the country. You heard stories about people traveling to London and then from London coming to France because Americans could travel to London at the time. That was a very risky way of doing it. There was no 100% guarantee that you would make it into France without being like carded or asked for papers. And once they found out you were American, they would just send you back home anyway. We would have small gatherings here and there with, you know, friends or teammates of mine. And, you know, that I guess was cool because you get at least a taste of socializing. A lot of the Americans that I knew that were living in France, you know, we struggled mightily. You couldn't go to gyms were closed. You couldn't go to bars were closed. Restaurants were closed. Malls were closed. So it's like, even when you did have time to explore and go around and see different things, you can't. They're closed, you know. You end up doing a lot of the things that you would have done in America, which is kind of a bummer because, you know, I don't have to travel to watch Netflix, you know what I mean? I don't have to travel to just stay in and, you know, rent movies or listen to music, you know. So that's kind of what it became. You know, you're living in a different country, but you're just playing the game all day. Overall, I'd say living in France has been a great experience. I believe that everybody should be traveling at a young age, and this is why I'm making this video. I want to motivate people my age and younger to get out and see the world, because it will shape your perspective. Yes, there's the best example. In America, we're more work-based. You know, work comes first. We're all trying to get rich. We're trying to do this. We're trying to do that. But in France, you know, they really look at it from a different lens. So just seeing that and seeing how people live and operate in that type of way, it could change your whole perspective. Maybe you might like that way of living better than the way you've been living. But if this is all you know, you have nothing to compare it to. There's been things that when I traveled there, I liked and I picked up on and implemented it in the way I live here, you know. And then there's other things that you will see in, you know, you're glad you got to see, but it's like, you know, you have no use for it. Thanks for watching. I'll do a similar video to this in the future, talking about what it's like to live in Spain. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Peace.